You've given us a truly compelling set of material this time, all pointing towards something so fundamental it's almost invisible.
Hmm.
Change. It's not just about things being different, but change as the bedrock of the universe and our lives within it.
Precisely. We're taking a deep dive into change itself. Your sources, well, they touch on its philosophical underpinnings, its scientific mechanisms, how it shapes societies and history,
Right.
and even how we experience it personally.
Right.
So our mission really is to pull out the essential insights about this constant flux, the stuff that will hopefully sharpen your understanding of the world around you.
Okay, so where do we even begin to unpack something this big? I guess the really big thinkers have been grappling with this for ages, right?
Oh, absolutely. Philosophy gives us a really foundational lens here. Think way back to ancient Greece. You had Heraclitus.
The everything flows guy.
Exactly. He famously said, everything flows, nothing stays. That constant change is the only true reality. But then contrast that with Parmenides. He argued that, well, reality is ultimately static, unchanging. And change, that's just an illusion our senses create.
Wow. Talk about a head scratcher. It's like they were describing completely different existences.
It really is.
But it highlights this core tension, doesn't it, between, stability and flux.
It does. And Aristotle, who came a bit later, he dove much deeper. He considered change, or kinesis as he called it, really central to understanding both the natural world and, well, how we should live.
Right.
And he gave us this very structured way to think about why and how things change, his 4 causes.
Ah, yes, the material, formal, efficient, and final causes. It sounds a bit abstract at first, maybe.
It can seem that way.
But it's surprisingly practical when you break it down. Can you give us a quick sort of real-world example?
Sure, yeah. Think about a carpenter building a table. The material cause is, well, the wood. Simple enough.
Okay.
The formal cause is the blueprint, or just the idea of the table's shape in the carpenter's mind. The design, exactly. The efficient cause is the carpenter actually doing the work, the sawing, the hammering, assembling it.
The action.
Right. And the final cause, Aristotle would argue, is the purpose of the table. Why build it? Maybe to eat meals on or to work at. Its function.
So if you apply that thinking to, say, a big societal shift.
Yeah, you could ask, what's the underlying stuff involved? That's the material. What's the new form it's taking? The formal. What are the driving forces making it happen? Efficient. And what's the ultimate aim or consequence? The final cause.
That's actually a great framework, like a universal checklist for understanding transformation.
It can be surprisingly useful, even today.
And Aristotle also talked about potentiality and actuality, didn't he?
Yes, definitely. That's key to his view.
Like a seed holds the potential to become a tree,
Right.
But it only becomes an actual tree through the process of change, through growth.
Exactly. Change for him is that journey. It's the actualization of potential. The seed isn't a tree yet,
Right.
But it has the inherent capacity, and growth unfolds that capacity.
And he made that distinction, too, between accidental and substantial change. That always struck me as important.
It is, very. Accidental change is when something's properties change, but its fundamental nature stays the same.
Like learning a new skill.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
Someone learns a language. They're still the same person, fundamentally, but they've gained a new attribute and a new property. That's accidental.
Okay.
Substantial change, though, that's when something fundamentally comes into being or ceases to exist altogether.
Like burning wood. It stops being wood.
Precisely. It becomes ash, smoke, gases, entirely different substances. That's substantial change.
So one is changing what something has or does. The other is changing what it is.
You got it. And Aristotle really hammered this home because he believed physical objects are real and we see them changing constantly. So change must be real, too. He was arguing against those folks who said it was all illusion.
Right, like Parmenides.
Exactly. Now, philosophical thinking didn't just stop with Aristotle, obviously.
No, of course not.
Later thinkers built on this. Hegel, for instance, gave us the dialectical process.
Thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Right. An idea or situation, thesis, encounters its opposite, antithesis. And the conflict leads to a new, higher state synthesis that incorporates elements of both. He saw this as a model for how thought and even history itself evolves.
That idea of progress through sort of clashing forces is really powerful. And then Kant, he shifted the focus a bit, didn't he? More towards our perception.
Yeah, Kant emphasized how our own minds structure our experience of change. We don't just passively receive it. Our minds organize it according to inherent categories like time and space.
So how we understand change is part of the equation.
Definitely. And contemporary philosophers, they're still digging into the nuances.
Yeah.
We might define change simply as, properties varying over time.
It's straightforward enough.
But then you get into tricky distinctions like Cambridge change versus real metaphysical change.
Okay, Cambridge change. That's more about how we describe something, right? Not the thing itself fundamentally changing.
Exactly. The classic example is Socrates becoming shorter than Theaetetus because Theaetetus grew taller. Socrates didn't shrink, but his relational property changed. Or you becoming an uncle when your sibling has a kid.
Right. I didn't change intrinsically, but my relationship did. How people refer to me did.
That's Cambridge change. Real metaphysical change is an actual alteration in the thing's own intrinsic properties.
Got it. A shift in labels versus a shift in being.
Mm-hmm. And philosophers even wrestle with the instant of change. Like what exactly is happening at that precise moment of transition? It gets complex fast.
It's like trying to pinpoint the exact moment water becomes ice.
Kind of, yeah. And you still thinkers today echoing those ancient Eleatics like Parmenides who argue that change is ultimately paradoxical, maybe not truly real in the way we assume.
It just shows how fundamental it is, yet how slippery it can be to define perfectly.
It really does. But okay, let's shift gears from philosophy to science. Because science, in a lot of ways, is all about observing, measuring, and explaining the transformations we see in the natural world.
Absolutely. And in physics, change basically boils down to alterations in the state or properties of matter and energy over time.
Right. And a really basic distinction they make is between physical change and chemical change.
Physical change is more about appearance or form, yeah, like ice melting back into water.
Exactly. It's still H-Euros. The molecules rearrange, but the substance itself isn't fundamentally altered. Boiling water, dissolving salt, those are physical changes too.
But chemical change is different. That's when new substances are actually formed.
Right. The molecules themselves break apart and recombine in new ways. Baking a cake flour, eggs, sugar become something totally new through chemical reactions. Or, your example earlier, burning wood. The wood reacts with oxygen, you get ash, carbon dioxide, water vapor, completely different stuff.
Makes sense, though the sources did mention the line isn't always perfectly sharp between the two.
That's true. There can be gray areas sometimes.
Yeah.
But the distinction is really useful. And then physics takes us to the grandest scale possible. Cosmological change, the evolution of the entire universe.
Whoa. Yeah, that's change on a mind-bending scale.
It really is. The Big Bang Theory itself, our best model, describes the universe starting from this incredibly hot, dense state billions of years ago.
And expanding and cooling ever since.
Exactly. That initial expansion set the stage for, everything. Galaxies, stars, planets.
And that expansion is still happening now, right? We see the evidence in the redshift of light from distant galaxies. They're moving away from us.
Precisely. And not only is it expanding, but the expansion seems to be accelerating, which is where dark energy comes in.
Ah, the big mystery, this force pushing things apart faster and faster.
Yeah, this dominant component of the universe that we, frankly, don't understand very well. It might even be changing in strength over cosmic time, which adds another layer of complexity.
It's incredible. And the early universe itself went through these huge transformations, these phase transitions.
Like the quark-hadron transition or the electro-weak transition.
Yeah.
Moments when the fundamental state of matter and the forces governing it radically shifted.
Hard to even wrap your head around that.
It is. But these transitions were crucial. They basically determined the fundamental particles and forces that make up our universe today. Okay, so from the cosmic scale, let's zoom way in. Biology gives us another profound perspective on change. Evolution.
Right. Evolution as the change in heritable traits within populations over generations, it's the engine driving the incredible diversity of life we see.
Exactly. And the sources highlight those key mechanisms. Natural selection.
Survival of the fittest, basically. Traits that help an organism survive and reproduce become more common.
Right. Then there's genetic drift, random changes in gene frequencies, especially important in small populations. It's more about chance.
Okay.
Mutation, the ultimate source of new variation, actual changes in the DNA sequence.
The raw material for evolution.
Precisely. And gene flow, which is just the movement of genes between populations, like through migration.
So it's this mix of like directed processes like selection and random ones like drift and mutation all interacting.
That's a great way to put it. And we see this playing out on different scales. Microevolution is change within a species.
Like bacteria developing antibiotic resistance.
Perfect example. And macroevolution is change across species, leading to new forms of life over much longer timescales. Think the evolution of birds from dinosaurs.
And we have really concrete examples of evolution happening, even that we can observe. The sources mentioned house sparrows adapting to different climates.
Yep, in North America after they were introduced.
And the famous peppered moths in England changing color because of industrial pollution.
Classic case study. Shows natural selection in action really clearly.
These aren't just theories, they're observable processes.
Absolutely. The evidence is overwhelming. Now, if we want to model and understand the patterns of change, not just in biology, but across many fields, we often turn to mathematics, specifically dynamic systems.
Okay, dynamic systems. Using math equations to describe how things change over time sounds potentially complicated.
It can be, yeah. But the basic idea is to capture the rules governing how a system evolves. You might use differential equations for continuous change.
Like population growth over time.
Exactly. Or difference equations for discrete step-by-step changes.
Like maybe changes in a stock price from one day to the next.
Could be.
Yeah.
And these models can be simple or incredibly complex. Linear models have straightforward relationships, while nonlinear ones capture more intricate feedback loops and interactions.
And deterministic versus stochastic.
Right. Deterministic models predict a single outcome if you know the starting conditions perfectly. Stochastic models incorporate randomness, acknowledging that real-world systems often have unpredictable elements.
And these aren't just theoretical exercises, they get used in practice.
Oh, absolutely. Physics, engineering, economics, biology, ecology.
Right.
Analyzing dynamic systems is crucial in countless fields. Concepts like equilibria.
Stable states where things don't change.
Right, or unstable ones they move away from. Then there's stability. Does the system return to equilibrium after a nudge? And sensitivity. How much does a tiny change in the starting point affect the long-term outcome? Think chaos theory, the butterfly effect.
Okay, yeah. It's a powerful way to analyze the underlying mechanics of transformation.
It really is. So science gives us these frameworks for understanding change across scales, from the cosmos to life itself. Now let's bring it back to the human realm. History and the social sciences, how do they approach change?
Well, history seems fundamentally about change, doesn't it? Looking at how societies, institutions, ideas transform over time.
Exactly. But it's not just listing events. It's about understanding the processes of transformation, the causes, the consequences.
And importantly, looking at continuity too, right? What stays the same even as other things are shifting.
Crucial point. That context is vital. Change doesn't happen in a vacuum. And while history often unfolds gradually, looking over longer periods reveals really profound shifts.
And what drives these historical changes? The sources mention a bunch of things.
Yeah, a whole range. Technology is a huge one. Think agriculture, printing, the internet.
Definitely.
But also big events like natural disasters, wars, social movements. Economic developments play a massive role. Broader political, social, technological forces. It's complex.
And that distinction between change and progress seems really important here too.
Absolutely critical. Change just means different. Progress implies better, movement towards some desired state. And that's a value judgment.
Totally subjective, or at least culturally dependent.
Very much so.
Okay.
What counts as progress is often debated and depends heavily on your ethical framework.
Okay, and shifting to the social sciences, like sociology,
Yeah.
they're looking at change within the social structure itself.
Right. How do mechanisms within society alter? Things like cultural symbols, patterns of behavior, social organizations, values. How do those shift?
And there are different theories trying to explain how that happens.
Lots of them. Early evolutionary theories saw societies progressing linearly, which is now seen as a bit simplistic and sometimes ethnocentric. Cyclic theories suggest phases of growth and decline. Structural functionalism sees society as interconnected parts, so change in one area affects others.
And conflict theory, that focuses on power struggles.
Exactly. It sees conflict and inequality as key drivers of change. Then you have modernization theory, world systems theory focusing on global capitalism, neo-evolutionist ideas looking at long-term patterns.
So many different angles trying to capture this complex process.
Each offering valuable insights. And the sources of social change are varied too. Contact between societies, environmental shifts, technology again, population changes, new ideologies, economic factors, social movements, political actions.
It's a real web of influences.
It really is. To make this more concrete, maybe we can look at some of those huge historical transformations, those epochs that really changed everything, like the agricultural revolution.
Yeah, the Neolithic Revolution, that shift from hunting and gathering to farming and settling down, seems like a fundamental turning point.
Absolutely massive. Starting around, what, 10,000 BCE?
Yeah.
It completely altered human existence.
Well, first off, population growth, right? More reliable food meant more people could survive.
Huge population boom. And
Yeah.
that led to permanent settlements, villages, towns, eventually cities, a totally different way of organizing life compared to nomadic bands.
And that allowed for other things, like specialization of labor. Not everyone had to farm.
Exactly. You could have artisans, priests, leaders. More complex social hierarchies developed. Trade started to become more significant. And agriculture itself drove technological innovation, the plow, irrigation.
It even changed how people thought, didn't it? Their relationship with nature, focusing on cycles, maybe new religious ideas.
Definitely influenced culture and belief systems. But as the sources point out, it wasn't all positive.
Right. Denser populations meant easier spread of disease.
Yep. And the accumulation of surplus food and resources likely contributed to the beginnings of significant social inequality.
So change brings new opportunities, but also new problems.
Often the case. And agriculture itself kept changing. The British agricultural revolution in the 18th century brought machinery, new techniques.
And the Green Revolution in the 20th century with high-yield crops and fertilizers.
Both had massive impacts on food production, population, labor, even mortality rates.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing story of agricultural transformation.
Okay, then another huge one. The Industrial Revolution, late 18th century, starting in Britain.
A total paradigm shift from agrarian economies to manufacturing-based ones, driven by huge technological leaps, steam engine, power loom, cotton gin.
Leading to mass production, unprecedented economic growth, wealth.
Absolutely. But also immense social upheaval.
Yeah.
Massive migration from countryside to cities, rapid, often chaotic urbanization.
And the rise of the factory system, the industrial working class, often facing brutal conditions.
Terrible conditions, yeah. But also the growth of a new middle class. It reshaped families, brought women and children into the industrial workforce in new ways.
And the downside, those urban slums, overcrowding, poverty, disease.
Significant negative consequences alongside the economic expansion. Culturally, it changed values, norms, led to consumerism, new economic theories like capitalism and socialism, the rise of labor unions.
Its impact is just everywhere, still today. It laid the foundation for modern capitalism, didn't it?
Absolutely. And global interconnectedness really took off. Then, going back a bit, the Renaissance.
The rebirth after the Middle Ages in Europe.
Yeah, 14th to 17th centuries, a flowering of culture, art, politics, economics, marked by this renewed interest in classical Greece and Rome, their philosophy, literature, art.
And humanism was central to that, right?
Sure.
Focusing on human potential, reason, creativity.
Very much so. A shift towards valuing human dignity and achievement. Also, a move towards secularism and individualism, less focus on purely religious explanations, more on individual experience, challenging church authority in some ways.
And the printing press. Gutenberg's invention arriving right in the middle of this, that must have been revolutionary for spreading ideas.
Huge catalyst. Knowledge could spread much faster and wider than ever before. It fueled the whole movement, contributed to questioning the Catholic Church, leading eventually towards the Protestant Reformation.
And it paved the way for what came next, like the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment.
Exactly. It was a critical bridge period. And those are also mentioned as pivotal moments, the scientific revolution fundamentally changing how we understood the natural world.
Based on observation and reason.
Right. The Enlightenment, championing reason, individual rights, influencing revolutions in America and France.
Shaping modern ideas of liberty and democracy.
Then the 20th century, massive ideological clashes, communism, fascism, world wars, reshaping global politics.
And now the information revolution. Computers, the internet, transforming basically everything again. Communication, commerce, social life.
It's just constant, isn't it? This complex interplay of forces, technology, society, politics, economics, culture, all driving change throughout history.
It really puts our current moment in perspective.
It does. And if we dive a bit deeper into the science of some of these transformations, back to evolution and biology. It's not just history, it's the ongoing engine of life's diversity.
Driven primarily by natural selection adapting to the environment.
Right, favoring advantageous traits, but also influenced by genetic drift, those random chance events, especially in small populations.
And mutation constantly introducing new variation.
Raw material, yeah. And gene flow mixing genes between populations through migration.
And the evidence for all this is just vast, right? Fossils, anatomy, DNA.
Overwhelmingly strong evidence from multiple independent lines. Fossil records showing transitions, comparative anatomy revealing common ancestry, molecular biology showing similarities in DNA and proteins across species. Even direct observations.
Like the sparrows, the moths, pesticide resistance in insects, antibiotic resistance.
All observable evolution happening right now. And sobering point, human activities destroying habitats, pollution, climate change are now major drivers of evolution for many species.
We're part of the selective pressure now.
In a big way. Now, shifting back to the cosmic scale physical cosmology, it's the study of the universe's origin, evolution, future. And it's all about change.
Starting with the Big Bang, that incredibly hot, dense beginning, followed by expansion and cooling.
Which is still ongoing, confirmed by that redshift of distant galaxies.
And those early phase transitions were critical moments of fundamental change.
Absolutely. And the universe's expansion is this tug of war between gravity trying to pull things back together and dark energy pushing them apart, accelerating the expansion.
And the universe's composition is mostly the stuff we barely understand, dark energy and dark matter.
About 95% is dark energy and dark matter. Ordinary matter, everything we see and interact with, is only about 5%. Huge mysteries remain.
Like the exact nature of dark matter and dark energy, and the Hubble tension disagreement about how fast the universe is actually expanding.
Exactly. And whether dark energy itself might be evolving, these are frontiers of research. But the universe is constantly evolving, galaxies forming and merging, stars being born and dying. It's a dynamic place.
And linking back, mathematical models of dynamic systems help us understand these processes.
They provide the framework, yes. Using equations differential for continuous, difference for discrete, to model how systems change based on underlying rules.
And we talked about classifying them. Linear, nonlinear, static dynamic, deterministic, stochastic.
Right. Each classification tells us something about the system's behavior and the math needed to analyze it. And the applications are everywhere: physics, engineering, biology, economics.
Using concepts like equilibria, stability, sensitivity to understand how these systems behave and respond.
Precisely. Analyzing stable states, how systems react to disturbances, how sensitive they are to small changes. It's the mathematical language of change.
Okay, so we've looked at the grand scales, the deep science. Let's bring it right down to the individual. How do we experience and navigate change?
Well, change is constant across our lifespan, isn't it? Biologically, we grow, mature, age. Psychologically, our thinking, emotions, personality, sense of self evolve. Socially, our roles, relationships, behaviors shift.
Developmental psychology studies all this, right? Stage theories for language, morality, identity.
Exactly. Models trying to capture these patterns of development. It's always this interplay of our innate makeup, our experiences, and our environment.
And socially, we develop attachments, build networks, take on different roles, influenced by culture, society, personal experiences.
It's a continuous process.
Yeah.
And while there are common patterns, everyone's developmental path is unique.
And psychologically, how do we react to change itself? Novelty seems key.
Oh, yeah. Novelty can be really stimulating. The brain releases dopamine, it grabs our attention, boosts memory, creativity, can even make us feel happier.
But too much predictability leads to boredom.
Right, it's a balance. Then there's uncertainty. Our brains seem wired to prefer predictability, so uncertainty often triggers the amygdala, fear, anxiety.
And we cope in different ways, seeking information, avoiding it, trying to control things.
All sorts of strategies. Learning to tolerate uncertainty, though, is really important for well-being.
And loss. Change often involves loss. Grief is the natural response.
Absolutely. Losing someone or something important, a person, a job, a relationship, a way of life. Grief can manifest emotionally, physically, cognitively, behaviorally.
And it's not necessarily those neat stages we sometimes hear about.
Increasingly, the thinking is it's much more fluid, individualized, cyclical perhaps, not a strict linear progression. Coping involves feeling the emotions, seeking support, adapting over time.
And cognitive appraisal theory comes in here too. How we interpret the change matters hugely.
Definitely. It's not just the event, but our subjective evaluation. Primary appraisal. Is this relevant? Is it a threat? A challenge? Secondary appraisal. What resources do I have to cope?
So different appraisals lead to different emotional and behavioral responses to the exact same event.
Precisely. Which helps explain why people react so differently to change.
And what influences those individual differences? Personality, past experiences.
All of the above. Personality traits like openness or resilience matter. Past positive experiences with change might make you more adaptable. Negative ones might lead to resistance. Beliefs about change itself, is it necessary? Likely to be good or bad?
Cognitive styles too, like tolerance for ambiguity.
Yes. And cultural background plays a role in norms around change. Attitudes towards authority, how uncertainty is viewed. Some cultures have higher uncertainty avoidance than others.
And change management models try to use these psychological principles to help people through transitions.
Exactly. Models like Lewin stages, Cotter steps, 80-carat, even the Kubler-Ross curve, adapted for organizational change. They try to provide structure and support, acknowledging the human psychological element.
Makes sense. Now, when change happens on a larger scale, especially societal change, it inevitably raises ethical questions, doesn't it?
Or absolutely. Big changes rarely affect everyone equally, and they often force us to confront competing values. Different ethical frameworks give us different ways to evaluate these changes.
Like utilitarianism,
Yeah.
focusing on the greatest good for the greatest number.
Right. From that view, a change with widespread benefits might be considered ethical, even if some are disadvantaged.
But deontology would look at it differently, more about duties and rights.
Exactly. Deontology asks, does the change violate fundamental rights or duties? The consequences might be less important than whether the action itself is inherently right or wrong according to certain rules.
And virtue ethics focuses on character.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it asks, does this change promote virtues like justice, courage, compassion? How does it shape the character of individuals in society?
So evaluating something like, say, a new technology, you could get different answers depending on which ethical lens you use.
Definitely. Think about AI or genetic engineering. Utilitarians might focus on potential benefits, deontologists on risks to autonomy or privacy rights, virtue ethicists on how it affects human character and relationships.
And these dilemmas play out in social reforms, too. Debates about equality, justice, fairness.
Constantly. And environmental changes like climate change force huge ethical questions about our responsibility to future generations, to other species, to the planet itself.
Even looking back at history involves ethical judgment, right? Evaluating past actions based on contemporary or evolving moral standards.
Yes. Assessing justice, rights, responsibilities related to historical events and their ongoing legacies. It requires careful consideration of these different ethical frameworks and the values they prioritize.
It's clear that navigating change ethically is incredibly complex. And these big shifts also impact our core beliefs, don't they? Our worldviews, religions, philosophies.
Massively. Religious beliefs and institutions aren't static. They respond and adapt to societal changes, scientific discoveries, political shifts.
Like the impact of the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, challenging traditional religious explanations.
Huge impact. It led to the rise of secular thought, deism, skepticism, critical analysis of religious texts. Religions responded in various ways. Some reinterpreted doctrines to align with science, others resisted, leading to ongoing tension.
And the Industrial Revolution also had effects.
Yeah, urbanization and industrial life contributed to secularization for some, but also spurred new religious movements and revivals, often focused on personal experience or addressing social problems created by industrialization. Views on social justice and the church's role also evolved.
So a constant interaction and adaptation, and philosophy is similarly dynamic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Philosophy is constantly engaging with changes in society, science, culture. That's its nature.
We can see that historically. Medieval scholasticism giving way to Renaissance humanism.
Right, reflecting broader cultural shifts. Then the scientific revolution spurred empiricism and rationalism. Bacon, Descartes, Locke, Newton, emphasizing observation, reason, understanding the natural world differently.
Followed by the Enlightenment, focusing on reason, individual rights, influencing political thought.
And then the 19th century brought idealism, positivism, Marxism, responding to the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. The 20th century saw existentialism, postmodernism, grappling with world wars, technology, new social realities.
It's a continuous evolution of questioning assumptions, developing new frameworks, reinterpreting concepts in light of change.
Exactly. And the same applies to ideologies, those systems of belief that shape political and social action. They aren't fixed. They're dynamic.
Responding to historical events, economic conditions, social shifts.
Constantly. Think about the rise of nationalism in the 19th century, the evolution of liberalism since the Enlightenment. Socialism and communism emerging from the Industrial Revolution, conservatism adapting over time.
And major events can really shake things up, trigger realignments.
Definitely. The Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, the Cold War events like these force ideologies to adapt, evolve, sometimes split.
And we see that today with political polarization, right? Ideologies shifting and hardening in response to current conditions.
It's a clear example. Ideologies are always in flux, responding to context, shaping the landscape, sometimes undergoing major paradigm shifts in their underlying beliefs.
It really highlights how our deepest beliefs are tied to the changing world. Which brings us, I suppose, to the present day and the huge global challenges we're facing, which seem like manifestations of change itself. The environmental crisis, for instance.
A profound and urgent example, yes. Climate change, driven by fossil fuels and industrialization. Biodiversity loss from habitat destruction, pollution, overexploitation. Pollution itself from industry and waste. Deforestation for agriculture and urbanization.
These aren't isolated problems, are they? They reflect a fundamental change in humanity's relationship with the natural world.
Exactly. Stemming from resource exploitation, population growth, unsustainable consumption patterns. It's change driven by us, now demanding change from us.
And then there's sociopolitical instability and conflict. The world seems incredibly turbulent right now.
It does feel that way. We see active conflicts causing immense suffering and displacement. We see rising political polarization, dividing societies, making governance harder.
And erosion of democratic norms and human rights in some places.
All signs of disruptive change. Shifts in power balances, ideological struggles, breakdown of established norms. And these things are interconnected. Conflict fuels instability. Instability hinders cooperation on other issues.
Like the environmental crisis.
Precisely. It's a world grappling with rapid changes in power, beliefs, and social structures.
And alongside this, economic and social inequalities persist, even worsen in some ways.
Yes. While global poverty has reduced in some measures, the gap between the rich and poor, both within and between nations, remains vast and often widening. This fuels unrest.
And issues like food insecurity, unequal access to health care, highlighted by the pandemic, persistent gender inequality, they show that change hasn't benefited everyone equally.
Not at all. These inequalities often stem from historical factors, systemic biases, unequal access to resources and opportunities. Change can exacerbate these disparities if not managed carefully.
And the sources mentioned other critical issues too, all linked to change.
Yeah, things like global health threats, beyond pandemics, non-communicable diseases, antimicrobial resistance, water scarcity, demographic shifts like aging populations in developed countries, and the huge potential and risks of emerging tech like AI ethics, bias, jobs, misuse.
Wow, it's an incredibly complex, interconnected picture of global transformation and challenge.
It really is. The scale and pace of change feel unprecedented in some ways.
So, given all this,
Yeah.
how do we navigate it? How can understanding change help us work towards, well, positive transformation, mitigation?
Well, acknowledging the interconnectedness is the first step. These aren't separate problems. It requires a concerted global effort. Multilateral cooperation is essential.
Working across borders.
Yes, and fostering innovative solutions through science, technology, social innovation, creative problem solving. We need new ways of thinking and doing.
And a fundamental commitment to sustainable and equitable development.
Absolutely. Development that benefits everyone, not just a few, and protects the planet for future generations. That means transitioning to renewable energy, promoting sustainable consumption and production, seriously addressing inequalities, building inclusive governance structures.
And it's not just up to governments, right? Individual and collective action matters.
Hugely important. Individuals making sustainable lifestyle choices, advocating for policy change, supporting organizations working on these issues. It all contributes. Collective action drives broader shifts.
So understanding the dynamics of change, how it works in physics, biology, history, society, psychology, can help us be more strategic.
Exactly. It helps us anticipate consequences, identify leverage points, design more effective interventions to mitigate the negatives and foster the positives. It requires a holistic view, a collaborative spirit, and an embrace of the fact that change is the constant.
It really comes full circle. Change isn't just something that happens to us, it's the fabric of existence. We've seen it from philosophy to physics, history to psychology, ethics to global crises.
It touches everything.
And those challenges we face now are so clearly tied to past and ongoing transformations. So the final thought, maybe, for everyone listening, how do your own views, your own actions fit into these currents of change? Building on what we've talked about, what role might you choose to play in shaping positive change in your own life and maybe in the world around you? Something to reflect on.
This is DigitView.